Okay. The land is literally theirs to steward, not Palestine, not the Muslims, not the United States. That land, which is why God has allowed it to be in their hands today. The land belongs to Jesus. It does not belong to the people of Israel, but they've been entrusted to steward the land until Jesus comes back. All right. It is good to be with you today. Hey, before we get started, I probably should go ahead and hit my stop clock. My stopwatch. Got a couple books. If you're just now checking out the channel, we've got a playlist, which is basically a course that goes with each of these books. We've got two courses, actually, one Daily Declarations and one Heavenly Realms. Would love you to check it out. It's our whole series on spiritual warfare, and it is significant. Basically, what we talk about in the books is your value is not in your flesh, but it's in the Holy Spirit that lives inside of you. You have been equipped in the Spirit. You're to have the fruit of the Spirit displayed in your character, operating out of the gifts of the Spirit, the mind of Christ through the Holy Spirit. You literally demolish strongholds, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, through the Holy Spirit. It is your armor in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 down through verse 20. It's a big deal. We go through that here. Spiritual warfare is a real thing. Your adversary is a spirit, which is demonic, and you've been resourced with the Holy Spirit. So we wrote a whole 2 books on that. We've got a third one coming out, Lord willing, before the end of the year on that subject. And then we'll see what we're going to do in the future. So love you to check that out. Today, I want to talk to you about Israel. Should Christians support Israel? And we've got couple videos that I downloaded from social media, and one's a response from Candace Owens. She's a conservative lady that has her own podcast and like millions of views and like big following. But she's pretty good. But she makes a comment on an interview that Tucker Carlson has with Ted Cruz. And they're talking about Israel. And Ted Cruz is like, he quotes the passage out of Genesis chapter 12 that, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. And Tucker Carlson's like, oh, is that national Israel? Is that old Israel? Is that now? It's a day. And they start arguing on it. And then Candace Owens ends up responding, and she's like, no, we shouldn't be supporting Israel. And then Kirk Cameron does a response video on the Candace Owens things, and he comes back and talks. I want to go through all of that, if I can, as quickly as I can, because it's a hot button issue. I mean, Israel has been at war forever, on and off, and they're at war now with Gaza, and there's all this, I travel all the time. And so there's all this, upheaval, from city to city, and protest and marches and opinions on Israel. And, it's just a mess. And so it centers around, should we get involved in that? And really there's a big aspect. There's a political side to it. And then there's a biblical side to it. There's but how do we as Christians, the world can respond however they want to. But when it gets into, should Christians support Israel? That's a big question, and it needs a biblical answer. And quite frankly, I think Ted Cruz is correct, but the way he comes about it is a little wonky. I don't know if he knows his Bible exegetically. I don't know if he knows the context of why we believe that Christians support Israel, and we should, but probably not the reasons that you think we should. So we're going to get to that in a second. And then the way that Tucker Carlson responds, I just, I like him on some certain things, but when it gets down to, and he's a Christian, of course, but when it gets down to this, he's out of his depth. He's like way off on this. And then Candace Owens, I don't know, she's crazy on some of the stuff she says, but that's just my personal opinion. But regarding her stance towards Israel, it's craziness. And I love Kirk Cameron, but he's a little bit off on this. He's right when he's talking. So let's start by looking at the videos if we can. It's good to see you. Good to be back with you. I just, actually tonight, I'll tell you, I got done with speaking at a church in Indiana and got on the road about 9 o'clock, drove 6 hours home, and it's a little before 2 a.m, but I have to do a couple videos because I'm leaving town again. So in a couple days, and I've got a big day tomorrow and Friday. So I'm in the studio in the middle of the night, but I'm wide awake and I feel great, kind of. So the first video I want to look at here, let's see if I can push pause. Yeah, I'm not going to listen to the whole thing here, but Leland's going to put this up on the screen. But this is the conversation. You'll see Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson debating. And if this is new to you, this is really important. But if this is new to you, this is kind of the context of what's been going on, not only around the world with Israel, but the commentary on what's going on with Israel and the, what people of faith are saying about Israel. Like, why should we stand with Israel? And I want to walk through this a little bit with you. So let's just jump into this. This is, again, an interview with Tucker Carlson and his little podcast show. He's interviewing Senator Ted Cruz. I think he's the senator. And then Candace Owens, you'll see, she's at the top, and then she gets in on it. So I'm going to pause it. I'm not going to go through the whole clip. But here's how it starts. You ready?
Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is.
And I'm really happy he said that, because when you hear it, you realize how ridiculous it sounds. Even if you're not following the theology, if you don't identify as a Christian, you realize that you have a senator that is sitting across saying that his number one reason, he didn't say one of the reasons, he said my number one reason that I support Israel is because the Bible commands me to do so. And just so you know, the Bible does not command, and this is what Tucker Carlson is getting to in that clip, it absolutely does not command you to support the modern state of Israel. Like Genesis is pointing to the modern 1948 created state of Israel, and you must support it, despite the fact that it is very much involved in what can only be described as demonic behavior since its creation, right? And so you're going to...
That's video number one. Okay. So they're like, the ancient Israel, this passage in Genesis doesn't apply, that what Israel doing today is demonic, that the 1948 Israel is not the Israel that God was talking about, all of that. So I found it interesting that Kirk Cameron weighs in on this. Listen to this. This is the Kirk Cameron video on this. And he weighs in on this because everybody's talking about this. Okay. It's like, I hear this at not every church, but a lot of the churches I go to. So here's Kirk Cameron, great guy, how he responds to it. I think you know who Kirk Cameron is.
Commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel.
I know the verse that Tucker Carlson's talking about in Genesis actually doesn't say Israel. It says that those who bless you, Abraham, this was before Israel, will be blessed by God, and those who curse you, Abraham, will be cursed by God. Jesus demystifies who the children of Abraham actually are, and Paul absolutely clarifies it. For not all who are born into the nation of Israel are truly members of God's people. Well, that sounds like it contradicts what Ted Cruz just said. Being descendants of Abraham doesn't make them truly Abraham's children. It sounds like he's saying not all of Israel is really Israel just because they're Jewish. Israel didn't have a nation or a land to call their own for almost 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple in the year 70 AD. The nation of Israel was recreated through some political operatives after World War II. So in that almost 2,000 year period, what did it even mean to bless Israel or to curse Israel? There was no Israel per se. I think the scripture makes it clear that it's about whether you're blessing or cursing the true children of Abraham, those who believe the promises of the gospel.
Okay. Those are the two videos I wanted you to see. So let me respond to this. Let's go back to the scriptures, okay? When you come into Genesis chapter 12, Kirk Cameron is right to an extent because Abraham had a relationship with Jesus, had a relationship with God, okay, that Jesus calls us to in terms of a relationship by faith. In other words, Abraham walked with God and was considered righteous because he walked with God in faith. Like there was no law back, like there was no 10 commandments. This is way before all of that. And so Abraham was considered righteous by faith. And that is like the whole book of Romans. That's what Jesus is talking like. We're called, the true children of God. What God desires in terms of relationship with us is modeled by Abraham. And by faith, we are Abraham's descendants. We are Abraham's children. However, Abraham still was born in a context, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the fathers of the land of Israel. In fact, come back and Leland, I want you to put this on the screen. And so this is just verse 2 and verse 3. Verse 1, God says, and it's not going to be on the screen, but verses 2 and 3 are of Genesis chapter 12. God says, listen, leave your country, go to this and where your father is, and I want to go and show you a new land. Then he says in verse 2, I will make you into a great nation. Okay. Christians, we are not bound by territory, land. We're not a nation. The kingdom of God, the children of God, we as Christians, not a nation thing. This for Abraham, in terms of the physical descendants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob of the people of Israel, he's talking about a nation. So Kirk Cameron says, like, when I will bless those who bless you, he says it's Abraham. No, he's talking about the nation that he will become. Let me look at verse 2. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. And literally, yes, he's talking about Abraham, but he's talking about, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to make you into a great nation. So the you is the great nation. And he's talking about Abraham, but he's going to be a descendant, and his legacy is going to produce a nation that is going to be blessed. That's chapter 12, verses 1, 2, and 3. And as you go through the Old Testament, this is reiterated over and over and over and over again. And I mean, I don't know if I want to read through all of these, but Genesis chapter 15, it's similar language, verses 18 through 21. Leland, throw this up for us. On the day that the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give this land. And there's boundaries from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land, and he lists all these people in verses 19, 20, and 21. That is the land of Israel, where the modern state of Israel was founded in 1948. That is over there right now. This is not Christian stuff. We're not like, oh, I'm a Christian, I got to move over there because God's given me the land. That's the land of Israel, okay? And by the way, listen to all these places. I got it on my computer here. I was going to write them down, but obviously we read Genesis 12 and 15, Genesis 17, verses 7 and 8, Genesis 26, verses 3 and 4, Genesis 28, 13 through 15, Exodus 6, 6 through 8, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1 through 5, Joshua chapter 1, verse 2. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, all the way throughout the Old Testament. This is constantly the land of Israel being tied to the physical descendants of Abraham. Because you understand, obviously, we're the children of Abraham by faith. And Jesus makes that distinction to the people of Israel that not all those who descend from Abraham are going to be called children of God, the true Israel. Because the true Israel, those who believe in Jesus by faith, okay, we are descendants of Abraham in terms of, like, not naturally, but in terms of being, by faith, belief in God, we are the descendants of Abraham. But Abraham had natural descendants. I mean, Paul talks about this. You can go, and we're not going to go through every single passage in the New Testament, but when Paul talks about in Romans chapters, I guess it's from chapter 2 through up through the beginning of chapter 4, just like the end of chapter 3, he's all talking about, he talks about the people of Israel and the blessing that they were to the world, that they are the ones that had the patriarchs. Like, so Abraham had physical descendants, and there was an inheritance for the people of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In fact, throw this up, Leland, I forgot to mention Genesis chapter 17, verse 8. The whole land of Canaan, where you are now an alien, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. That is for the people of Israel. That was for the people of Israel. They're the ones that came and were stewarding that land. You say, what do you mean by steward? If you come into Deuteronomy, I don't know how much of this we're going to put up, Leland, but in Deuteronomy, the end of the book, this is where Moses is getting ready to go up the mountain and die, and Joshua, he's handing, like, this is after the 40 years of wilderness, and I don't want to go through all of that. They tried to go in the land before. The people of Israel didn't want to go, so they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Moses is punished with the rest of the people because of the whole rock incident, and so he's not going to enter into the land. So Joshua and Caleb are going to lead the people of Israel into the land to possess the land. That's the story. Okay, and so right before Moses dies, before he goes up the mountain and dies, he basically reiterates the covenant that God made with the people of Israel and the responsibilities that they have for the land. This is so big. The land was being entrusted to Israel, and they were to steward that land. They were to steward that land. There was responsibilities with the land. Ultimately, because the land does not belong to Israel, it belongs to God, and it belongs to the true King of Israel, who's going to come back one day, and his name is Jesus, and Jesus inherits the land. So here's the paradigm, okay? God entrusts the land through Abraham to the physical descendants. Even though Abraham is going to have spiritual descendants, which are us, we don't have anything to do with the land. Christianity doesn't have anything to do with the land, okay? But to his physical descendants, so Abraham had spiritual descendants, us, but then the physical descendants were the people of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, 12 tribes, Moses, Old Testament people coming into the land. And the land was entrusted to the people of Israel and their descendants for a coming king to rule over them who would possess the land and own it. The land belongs to Jesus. It does not belong to the people of Israel, but they've been entrusted to steward the land until Jesus comes back. I know that's a lot, but I hope that makes sense. The people of Israel today, even today, okay, the land is literally theirs to steward, not Palestine, not the Muslims, not the United States. That land, which is why God has allowed it to be in their hands today. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, because when you come to Deuteronomy, and you should look at this for yourself. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 15 all the way down through this crazy long chapter. It's like 68 verses. And of course, chapter 29 is the renewal of the covenant. But he begins in this little section, beginning at verse 15, okay, there's curses for disobedience. The actual chapter begins with blessings for obedience. These are the great things that are going to happen. But if you don't steward the land, if you don't give it a Sabbath rest, if you don't abide by the covenant that God says, I'm going to give you Israel. This is all Israel. He says they're going to have curse, and it's bad. He begins in verse 15. Put this up, Leland, verse 15. If you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I will give you today, the curses will come upon you and overtake you. Verse 16. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. And then it's this whole just this blasting of all the bad things that's going to happen to you, okay? There's going to be blessings up through verse 14, first 14 verses of this chapter 28. There's going to be blessings. If you steward the land, you follow the covenant. If you don't, dude, there's going to be bad stuff. There's consequences for not stewarding the land. So he comes down, and at one point, I mean, dude, there's some crazy stuff in here. But in verse 32, he says, your sons and daughters will be given to another nation, and you will wear out your eyes watching them day after day, powerless to lift your hand. Yikes. Your sons and daughters will be given to another nation. That's verse 32. Verse 41, you will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them because they will go into captivity. This is a response of them breaking the covenant, not stewarding the covenant, and there's land stewardship in that. Verse 63 and 64. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it would please him to ruin you and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. That's the land of Israel, the people of Israel. Verse 64, then the land will scatter you among all the nations from one end of the earth to the other. I mean, I think there's another one in here if you go down. And verse 28 of the same chapter, of chapter 29, verse 28. In furious anger and in great wrath, the Lord uprooted you from their land and thrust you into another land as it is now. Like, there's all kinds of statements about, and this happened, by the way, when you get like the book of Daniel. And you can read about it. Jeremiah warns the people of Israel about it. Isaiah does at points. Ezekiel was like in captivity. So the people of Israel did not steward the covenant. They lived in rebellion. They didn't steward the land. They didn't give it a Sabbath rest like they were supposed to. And you can read all about that and study it on your own. They didn't do that. So literally God used the Babylonian Empire to come in under Nebuchadnezzar, and the people were exiled out of the land. And of course, if you get into Daniel chapter 9, which is a reference to Jeremiah 25 and Jeremiah 29, Daniel in chapter 9, verse 2, we'll have this on the screen. In the first year of King Darius's reign, I, Daniel, understood from the scriptures according to the word of the Lord given to Jeremiah the prophet that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. So Israel went into captivity for 70 years. Now, why were they thrust out of the land? Because the land belongs to God. It doesn't belong to the people of Israel. And the people of Israel were to steward the land according to God's direction. And they didn't. So you have constant exile from the land. And of course, that not only happens with, the Babylonian exile and, 586 and up, there's like 3 exiles from 605 BC to 586 BC. But ultimately, when they rejected the coming of Jesus, the Messiah, in 70 AD, the land was rendered desolate, and people of Israel were killed and taken into captivity throughout all the nations. And it just basically lay desolate for 2,000 years. People fought over it, and they had the Crusades, and you can go read all of that. It's crazy. But in 1948, the Israel was reborn, which is a fulfillment of prophecy. And that Israel, once again, took up stewardship of the land. It's interesting, in Zechariah, you have this prophecy in chapter 14 of Jesus. When his second coming, when he actually comes back, Jesus is going to land on the Mount of Olives. It's literally described in Zechariah split in two. You have the same imagery all throughout Revelation. I would look through Revelation, but it's plainest here. Like it just mentions Israel here. And it's kind of imagery language throughout, parts of Revelation, mainly chapters 19 and 20, but there's some other places in chapters 12 through 16. But it's really plain here in Zechariah 14. Look at verses 1, 2, and 3. A day of the Lord is coming when your plunder will be divided among you. Verse 2, I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured and the houses ransacked. But then verse 3, here's the one on the screen. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. So Jesus is going to be here. Listen, verse 4. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley with half the mountains moving north and half those moving south. And then you have all this description, but it says down in verse, and you can read through that, all kinds of description, but in verse 12, that there's going to be a plague with which the Lord will strike all the nations that fought against Jerusalem, which, see, he's coming to vindicate them. And I don't know if I want to read all of this, but if you go down all the way through this, verse 9 of Ezekiel or of Zechariah 14 is probably the most prominent. Verse 9 reads, which will be on the screen here. The Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day, there will be one Lord and his name, the only name. So this is obviously a prophecy. It hasn't been fulfilled yet because Jesus when he came, wasn't king over the earth. And, one Lord, one name, ruling over. And then you got all this description that comes down that, again, that verse 12, plagues are going to be over those, areas of the world that don't come and honor. Like it's the millennial reign that he's describing. Okay. So here's all what I'm describing you. With regards to the nation of Israel, the argument, the videos we're watching, the help with Kirk Cameron, what he said about Abraham as the spiritual, we're spiritual descendants from him. Get all of that, okay? Children of faith, kind of a deal. Abraham had physical descendants. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons, 12 tribes of Israel, all of that, okay? That went into captivity in Egypt. God sends Moses, leads the people out. Mount Sinai, they get the law, whole sacrificial system, and they march to the promised land, which is the land of Canaan, where that group of people, Abraham's physical descendants, are going to live. They wouldn't go into the land. They dwell out in the wilderness for 40 years. They come back. Moses goes up and dies. Joshua, Caleb lead them into the land. You have the whole land that's divided up, ends up becoming two kind of separate nations with Judah in the south and Israel in the north. And then Israel ends up falling, and then Judah ends up being taken into captivity in the land of Babylon. And Jerusalem's where Judah was. And so you have that whole thing that develops throughout the Old Testament. Those were the people of Israel that received the promise of covenant in Deuteronomy chapter 28 of stewarding the land and the consequences they didn't, which actually came to fulfillment under the whole Babylonian exile. And we read about it both in the prophets and with Daniel. So you can track this history. The people of Israel today that are over there, they're to steward the land that one day will go, as Zechariah 14 says, that will go to Jesus, where he will reign over the entire earth. The land belongs to Jesus. Okay, so why do we support Israel? This is the big question. 26 minutes later. Why do we support Israel? We support Israel not because they're righteous. Not because, listen, if you go to the modern state of Israel, just like Israel in the past, Israel today, like the nation of Israel is not a Christian nation. I meet people all the time. They're like, they're our brothers. There's a Messianic Judaism kind of a thing. And they're sons of God like we are. No. The only way you can be a child of the Most High God is through faith in Jesus Christ. Okay? Jew doesn't help you. And listen to this real quick here. I'm just going to throw this in real quick. In John chapter 1, I love this, down in verse 12. Leland put this up for us, verses 12 and 13. John writes in the gospel, beginning of his gospel, verse 12, chapter 1. To all who received Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And they're children of God, not born of natural descent, not from the people of Israel. In other words, you can't be like, oh, hey, my dad was a Christian, I'm a Christian, okay? Or I'm a Jew, automatically makes me a Christian. They're children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or husband's will, but born of God. The only way you can be a child of God is through faith in Jesus Christ. That's not Israel. For whatever Israel is today, okay, they at best believe in a God of the Old Testament, the same one, but they don't walk in relationship with him through Jesus Christ. And if you were to look, I went through some of the statistics. I don't know if that's within the scope of this video to talk about some of the problems in modern day Israel. They're not, I wouldn't consider them a righteous nation. I mean, Obviously, they're not Hamas, okay, which is not a nation, it's a terrorist group. Obviously, they're not Iran, okay. Obviously, they're not a Muslim country, okay. They're not like, on that level. But the reason we support Israel is not because they're always right. And listen, the reason we support Israel is not because they're right or righteous, or because they always do things. I mean, I'm sure they've got I'm not justifying anything they do. Okay. I personally think that you should be able to defend yourself against terrorist nations. We do as the United States. If Hamas was doing to us what's doing to Israel, dude, they would be over with. I don't care what Democrat, Republican president we're going to go after them. They drop bombs on us. You're going we wouldn't tolerate that. Well, Israel is not tolerating that. And it's ugly and war is terrible. And I'm not justifying anything they've done. I'm telling you that why we back the land of Israel is because, good or bad, they're going to be accountable to Jesus, and they have been entrusted to steward the land of Israel until Jesus. When Jesus comes back, he's setting his foot on the Mount of Olives. He's walking down into a temple that will be there, and he's going to sit there and rule. Period. The land belongs to Jesus. It does not belong to Israel. They are stewards. They're the one that's watching it for Jesus. And you could read the book of Revelation, especially the end. He comes back and they're like, ugh. They're going to look on the one they pierced. That's the whole Isaiah passage. They're going to look on the one they pierced and be like, dude, he is the Messiah. Jesus is like, yeah, get off my throne. So the land belongs to Jesus. So I wanted to cover that. I think that Kirk Cameron, who's fantastic, I think he misses it there. Abraham had physical descendants for sure, and a nation would be born. He says, Abraham, I'm going to take you and turn you into a nation. So the nation's still him. And the nation is a nation because of the covenant that God made with Abraham. God always honored the covenant because of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. So there's physical descendants, and out of those physical descendants would be born a Messiah, which Jesus did come, and everything goes to him. So that's the connection between Israel and Jesus. The connection is not one of faith like we have. The connection between Israel and Jesus is they are to steward. They literally were going to be the chosen people that God would produce a Messiah, and everything that God promised to Israel, they were to steward for this one king that would come and be the Son of God, be the child of the Most High God, and everything was going to be to him. It's in his inheritance. And so that's why we support Israel. Not because they're righteous, not because they're like us as Christians. They don't believe in Jesus. They're not children of the Most High God. They're who they are, but they're called to steward the land, and they're going to be accountable to Jesus. I hope that makes sense. That's my take, and I'm sticking to it. That's the biblical approach to Israel and the land. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. You can message me. I'll try to get to them. And we'll respond. All right, come back, watch another video.